Oh, Nexora, have you ever seen a planet so desperately trying to compensate for something? I mean, really. 3 artificial rings, 3 encircling a planet already dripping with so much gold that navigators complain about the glare. But that's Emperor Drax'ul for you, subtle as a supernova and twice as destructive. I'm Ambassador Krell Zantara, by the way. Yes, the Ambassador Zantara of the Vesperian Collective. Don't be impressed. My 6th-cycle appointment to this glittering cesspool of a capital world feels more like a punishment than an honor. My species values straightforwardness. The Empire does not. Ambassador Zantara, your posture suggests dissatisfaction, boomed the metallic voice of a protocol droid as I stood gazing out over the Senate Plaza. May I suggest a mild mood stabilizer before today's session? The Emperor has been known to execute representatives who display negative facial configurations. Thanks for the concern, I replied, straightening my dorsal ridges reflexively. But I'll stick with my natural disappointment. It served me well so far. The droid whirred anxiously. Poor thing was probably calculating the probability of being recycled alongside me when I inevitably annoyed our glorious leader. Speaking of his supreme insufferability, Emperor Drax'ul was making his signature fashionably late entrance to the Grand Senate Chamber. 214 species represented, and every single one forced to wait because apparently controlling 60% of the known galaxy means punctuality becomes optional. All rise for his imperial magnificence, eternal sovereign of the Nexaran Empire, conqueror of the 7 sectors, light of civilization, Emperor Drax'ul XIV. The crowd rose. I counted at least 12 representatives who seemed physically pained by the motion. The gravitites from Helios 9 practically had to pour themselves upward. Talk about demanding respect without considering basic biological diversity. Draxul himself was disappointing if you expected the monster from the propaganda hollows. A relatively normal-looking Nexaran, only distinguishable by the absurd quantity of rare minerals adorning his person. His skin, that characteristic Nexaran blue, seemed almost pallid under the weight of his ceremonial armor. 5 eyes, standard for his species, though rumor has it he had a 6th surgically added, then removed when multiocular enhancements fell out of fashion. The Senate recognizes the delegation from Earth, Drax'ul announced with such practiced disdain that several sycophantic senators actually chuckled. Our newest contributors to galactic civilization. The way he said civilization made it clear he considered humans about as civilized as bacterial colonies. Quite rich coming from someone whose ancestry includes ritual cannibalism, but I kept that observation to myself. The humans had joined the galactic community barely 2 decades ago, practically infants on the cosmic stage. They'd stumbled onto faster-than-light travel through what their representative called stubborn determination and a healthy disregard for theoretical impossibility. Most species take centuries to develop FTL. Humans did it in less than 100 years after discovering basic spaceflight. That tends to make established powers nervous. The Emperor acknowledges humans have met the minimum threshold for Senate representation, continued Grand Vizier Plex, Draxul's spineless mouthpiece, though we extend our patience as they acclimate to proper protocols. Translation: don't expect to be taken seriously, humans. You're here because we couldn't legally keep you out. The human delegation nodded pleasantly, apparently oblivious to the insult. Their lead representative even smiled, that bizarre baring of teeth that so many species find threatening but humans insist is friendly. Fascinating creatures, really. Absolutely terrible at hiding their emotions, yet somehow impossible to predict. We're just happy to have a seat at the table, said their representative with suspicious cheer. Even if it's at the kiddie end. Several translator units sparked in confusion. The Emperor's face twitched slightly. And that's when I first suspected the humans might be more interesting than anyone was giving them credit for. Jack Harlow was not what anyone expected in a galactic representative. For starters, he wore actual cloth, not the smart fabrics or living garments preferred by civilized species. His dark blue suit, as humans called it, looked laughably primitive next to the bioluminescent robes and gravity-defying attire of other diplomats. "Nice crown. Does it come with its own moon?" Harlow said to Emperor Drax'ul during their first official introduction. My translator nearly crashed attempting to process the statement. Not a formal greeting. Not a ritual platitude, just whatever that was. The Emperor's 5 eyes blinked in perfect asynchronous confusion. The Imperial crown contains fragments from 73 conquered worlds. It requires no celestial body. Just a joke, Your Supremeness. We'll work on those. Work on those? As if the Emperor needed assistance with humor. The Nexaran courtiers were practically hyperventilating from the perceived insult, while Harlow stood there, smiling that disarming tooth display humans' favor. That was my first real introduction to human humor. A deliberately incorrect statement delivered with perfect sincerity, somehow intended to create social bonding. Baffling. Unlike most representatives who spent decades studying imperial protocols before daring to speak in council, Harlow seemed to operate on pure improvisation. During his third session, he actually raised his hand and interrupted Grand Vizier Plex's 4-hour recitation of trade amendments. "Quick question," Harlow called out, causing several hibernating delegates to startle awake. "Why are all uncharted systems automatically claimed as Imperial territory? Seems a bit grabby." Grabby? The Emperor leaned forward on his floating throne. "The Empire extends the light of civilization to primitive worlds. This is our divine burden." Aha. Back home we called that colonization. Didn't end well for anyone. You could have heard a photon drop in that chamber. Several species with telepathic sensitivity began quietly evacuating the room. Representatives of Earth, Draxul's voice had that dangerous purr that usually preceded someone being vaporized. "Perhaps you misunderstand your position here. You are not equals. You are not advisors. You are observers, beneficiaries of imperial tolerance." Harlow nodded thoughtfully, tapping his finger against his lips. "So about that tolerance, does it extend to the mining operations you've started in the Tau Ceti system? Because that's awfully close to our territory, and we didn't receive any notification." "The Empire does not notify. The Empire proclaims." Drax'ul rose slightly, his throne humming with power. "The Tau Ceti excavation will proceed as planned. The resources there are vital to Imperial expansion." "Just saying, a courtesy call would have been nice." Harlow shrugged with exaggerated casualness. "Where I'm from, borrowing your neighbor's stuff without asking has consequences." That word consequences, it hung in the air like a toxic gas. Nobody threatened consequences to the Empire. Not even obliquely. I found myself oddly fascinated. Most species learned survival by submission, some through alliance, a few through specialized biological advantages. But humans? They seem to rely on what I can only describe as strategic audacity. During diplomatic receptions, while others competed for proximity to Imperial officials, Harlow spent time chatting with service droids and lower caste species. He asked questions about their homeworlds, their customs, their grievances. Where other diplomats saw furniture, Harlow saw intelligence sources. "They're making quite a collection of friends," I remarked to Planetary Overseer Nex Tabor at one such gathering. "Friends," she scoffed through her breathing apparatus. "What use are friends against Imperial might? Humans will learn, Ambassador Zantara. They will learn or they will perish." I nodded politely, but privately wondered who exactly would be doing the learning. The operation must appear random, chaotic. Nothing traceable. Emperor Drax'ul's voice carried through the supposedly secure chamber. I wasn't meant to be there, hiding behind a decorative column like some cheap spy vid protagonist. But when your embassy's communication system accidentally picks up encrypted Imperial transmissions, professional curiosity demands investigation. "What about survivors? asked Admiral Vortican, his tentacles twitching with what might have been excitement or anxiety. Hard to tell with Malkarians. There will be none, replied Draxul. Terra Nova will serve as a necessary example. Humanity must understand the price of defiance. My blood, all 4 types of it, went cold. Terra Nova, the fastest growing human colony. 8 million settlers, if intelligence reports were accurate. The attack force is comprised entirely of mercenaries. No Imperial signatures. Vortecan confirmed. Correct. The humans will blame pirates. The Senate will express condolences. Life will continue. The Emperor's eyes narrowed, with fewer humans. I backed away slowly, mind racing. 8 million lives. Families. A genocide disguised as a pirate raid. I needed to warn someone, anyone. Ambassador Zantara. How unexpected. Grand Vizier Plex's voice froze me mid-step. 4 Imperial guards materialized from hidden alcoves, weapons trained on my vital organs. All 6 of them. Just admiring the architecture, I said lamely. You know us Vesperians, always appreciating pillars. Indeed. Plex's smile never reached his eyes. Perhaps you'd care to join us? The Emperor would value your perspective on certain security matters. 3 days later, I watched the broadcast with the rest of the Senate. Terra Nova was gone, not just attacked, obliterated. The colony and half the planet's surface had been reduced to molten slag. The death count wasn't 8 million. It was 11,400,026. They were precise about the number, those human emergency broadcasts. Precise in a way that hurt. A tragic attack by unknown pirate forces, announced the Emperor, his face a perfect mask of practiced concern. The Empire extends its deepest condolences to our human friends. I said nothing, could say nothing. The neural inhibitor they'd implanted ensured that. I could think treason but not speak it. A sophisticated little device, really. Almost admirable technology if it wasn't currently suppressing my gag reflex at the Emperor's performance. Around the Senate chamber, reactions varied by species. The Gellans wept openly, their empathic nature making them feel echoes of the human suffering. The Dorn collective representatives clicked their mandibles in what might have been distress or approval they'd lost mining rights to humans in 3 systems last year. Most others simply stared ahead, expressions carefully neutral. Nobody wanted to be next. The Empire will increase patrols near human territories, Draxul continued magnanimously, to prevent such unfortunate incidents in future. Translation: the next massacre will be even better coordinated. But the most disturbing reaction came from Jack Harlow. He simply sat there, listening to the Emperor's lies with an expression of polite attention. No outburst, no accusations, no tears. Just calm, focused observation. During the mandatory reception that followed, because nothing says we mourn your loss like canapes and imported wine, I managed to position myself near Harlow. Ambassador, I nodded, trying to communicate something, anything with my eyes that the inhibitor wouldn't register as rebellious thought. Ambassador Zantara. Harlow's voice was pleasant, conversational. Beautiful gathering, isn't it? The Empire certainly knows how to commemorate a tragedy. His calm was unnerving. 11 million of his people were ash, and he was making small talk. The official investigation will surely find these pirates, I said carefully. Oh, I think we all know exactly who's responsible. Harlow smiled, that same diplomatic smile, but something had changed. His eyes remained fixed on Draxul across the room. And there will be an appropriate response. The Empire's military might is unmatched, I warned, the closest I could come to actual advice under the inhibitor's influence. Funny thing about humans, Harlow said, sipping his drink. We're not great at knowing when we're outmatched. Terrible evolutionary flaw, really. He patted my shoulder amicably, and walked directly toward the Emperor, still smiling that terrifying smile. Several nearby telepathic species suddenly found urgent reasons to leave the reception hall. "Ambassador, you may want to see this." My aide burst into my quarters without protocol or announcement. Arian Vesperian behavior. The orbital arrays there well. I followed him to the viewing bay and felt my secondary heart stutter. The space around Nexora was filled with ships. Not Imperial vessels with their gaudy gold filigree and unnecessary flourishes. These were sleek, dark, and unmistakably human in design. Hundreds of them. No thousands. "Where did they come from?" gasped a Human Diplomat beside me. "Human ships they don't have stealth capabilities." Apparently they did. Imperial alert sirens began wailing throughout the capital. Across the Grand Plaza, I watched panic spread like a fashionable disease among the elite. The most powerful military force in the galaxy had just been caught with its metaphorical pants down, and nobody had an explanation. Emergency Senate session. Announced the public address system. All representatives report immediately. The Senate chamber was chaos when I arrived. Species that had evolved to never show emotion were visibly distressed. The hive mind of Belta 9 had split into individual units, something they only did when preparing for war or mating. Given the circumstances, I assumed it was the former. Emperor Drax'ul strode in with his usual pompous entrance, but the theatrics fell flat amid the panic. For once, nobody stood for the announcement of his numerous titles. That's when Jack Harlow walked calmly to the central speaking platform, a space traditionally reserved for the Emperor and his direct officials. "Good morning, everyone," Harlow said pleasantly, as if addressing a neighborhood brunch rather than a terrified Galactic Senate. "Apologies for the unannounced visitors. Traffic control around your capital is surprisingly easy to bypass." "This is an act of war," roared Draxul, his composure fracturing. No, Harlow's voice hardened slightly. An act of war would be, say, exterminating 11 million civilians and blaming it on pirates. The chamber went silent. I watched comprehension dawn on dozens of alien faces as they processed the accusation. "Humanity demands justice," Harlow continued, still standing casually with his hands in his pockets. "The architects of the Terra Nova massacre will surrender to human custody. All Imperial mining operations in human-adjacent systems will cease. Reparations will be paid." Draxul's laughter echoed through the chamber. "You primitive apes have overplayed your hand. My Imperial fleet will reduce your ships to scrap metal. My guards will execute you where you stand." "It's about your fleet." Harlow tapped something on his wrist device. The massive display screens around the Senate chamber activated, showing Imperial shipyards across 3 systems. All were now burning, massive explosions blossoming in silence across space. We visited those first. Several Senate members actually applauded before quickly composing themselves. "This is your last chance," Emperor, Harlow said, his tone almost regretful. "Surrender the guilty parties. Make amends or face the consequences. Regards." Draxul's voice rose to a shriek. "Seize the human representative." 20 elite Imperial guards moved forward, energy weapons aimed at Harlow. The human didn't even flinch. Unfortunate choice. One moment the Imperial guards were advancing on Harlow, energy weapons charged to vaporize the lone human. The next moment, well, they weren't alone anymore. From air vents, from behind decorative panels, even from within the massive sculptural monuments, 2 Imperial glory humans appeared. They wore form-fitting dark suits that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No bulky armor, no dramatic weaponry. Just small, efficient-looking devices in their hands and expressions of professional detachment on their faces. "What is this?" Draxul's voice carried a note I'd never heard before. "Fear. How did they get inside?" "Good question." The Senate chamber had 743 security protocols, ranging from DNA scanners to thought pattern analyzers. Yet somehow, humans had been hiding inside it, possibly for days. The first Imperial Guard fired at Harlow and missed. Not because Harlow dodged with superhuman speed or activated some fancy shield technology. The guard simply missed. His aim suddenly, inexplicably terrible, as if his muscles had forgotten decades of training. "Neural disruptors," whispered a Signarian senator next to me, her voice mixed with reluctant admiration. "They must be flooding the chamber with targeted electromagnetic pulses that interfere with motor control." A second guard managed to fire before collapsing. Then a third. None of their shots hit anything important. The humans moved with coordinated precision, neutralizing rather than killing. Imperial Guards, the most feared fighting force in 60 sectors, were being systematically disabled like misbehaving children. "Is anyone recording this?" asked a Dorn representative a bit too enthusiastically. "For security analysis purposes?" We were all recording it. History was happening, and we were about to find out which side of it we'd been on. Through this choreographed chaos walked Jack Harlow, still in his plain dark suit, still with his hands in his pockets. His path toward Emperor Drax'ul was direct, unhurried. 4 guards converged on him from different directions. 4 guards found themselves suddenly unconscious. "They're not even breaking a sweat," muttered a Human Diplomat, the ridge along his spine bristling with suppressed excitement. 11 of their colonies were annihilated last cycle by the Empire. Mine was the cycle before. Just saying. Senate members were now frantically signaling their home governments, some pledging continued loyalty to the Empire, others hastily drafting recognition of evolving political realities. The Amalgamated Banking Consortium representatives were already sending trade proposals to the human fleet. Magnificent opportunists, politicians. "You think this changes anything?" Emperor Drax'ul had abandoned his floating throne and was backing toward his private exit, surrounded by his remaining guards. "The Empire spans 1,000 worlds. You cannot hope to." "We don't need to conquer your empire," Harlow interrupted, still walking calmly forward. "We just need you." Draxul's exit door should have opened automatically at his approach. It remained stubbornly closed. "The inhibitor," Harlow said, looking directly at me now. "The one they put in your brain, Ambassador Zantara. It's been neutralized. Has been for weeks. Your testimony will be valuable." I felt a strange tingling at the base of my skull, followed by what I can only describe as mental silence. The constant suppression gone. Words I couldn't say before suddenly available. "The Emperor personally ordered the destruction of Terra Nova," I said, my voice shockingly loud in the now quiet chamber. I witnessed the command being given. The remaining guards looked at each other uncertainly. Several stepped away from Drax'ul. The Emperor's bravado collapsed like poorly designed architecture. "My person is sacred under galactic law. I demand diplomatic protection. I demand." "You're not getting it," Harlow said, now standing directly before the Emperor. He was shorter than Draxul by nearly half a meter, physically unimposing, and yet somehow the most dangerous thing in the room. 11,400,026 people. We know each name, we know each face, and you're going to answer for every single one. Draxul, the 14th Emperor of the Eternal Nexaran Empire, conqueror of the 7 sectors, light of civilization, did what no emperor had done in 800 years. He panicked. No one expected what happened next. Not the tactical analysts who had war-gamed human behavior for decades. Not the cultural anthropologists who claimed expertise on Earth customs. And certainly not Emperor Drax'ul himself. Jack Harlow grabbed the Emperor of 1,000 worlds by his ornate collar and began physically dragging him across the Senate floor. Not with technology, not with weaponry, with his actual human hands. This is sacrilege. Drax'ul shrieked, his imperial composure shattered like cheap glass. No being may touch the Emperor's person. Guards. Guards. The remaining guards looked at each other, at the efficient human operatives surrounding them, and made the collectively wise decision to remain exactly where they were. Release me immediately. I am the eternal sovereign. I am the light of civilization. Harlow continued dragging him, one hand firmly gripping the back of the Emperor's ceremonial robes. The ridiculous garment designed for floating majestically above subjects, not being hauled around like luggage tore slightly, revealing the pathetically ordinary body beneath. Through the central aisle they went, past the delegation pods, past the shocked representatives of 800 worlds. Draxul's ornate headpiece fell off, clattering across the polished floor with an undignified ping that echoed through the complete silence. I should do something, I thought. Make some diplomatic intervention, offer some compromise that would preserve galactic stability while acknowledging human grievances. That was my job, after all. But then I remembered the inhibitor in my brain. How casually they had violated my person, my thoughts. How easily 11 million humans had been erased. And I did nothing. No one did anything. Not the Mulcarian Defense Pact representatives with their superior weaponry. Not the Dorn Collective with their famed warrior culture. Not even the Emperor's own species. Everyone just watched. You cannot do this. The Empire will retaliate. Every human world will burn. Draxul's threats echoed through the chamber. Your ships are disabled. Your command structure is compromised. Your allies are currently drafting statements of neutrality. Harlow's voice remained conversational, almost friendly. But please continue. The entire galaxy is watching. And indeed they were. I noticed then the small hovering devices positioned strategically around the chamber. Broadcast drones. This wasn't just happening in the Senate, it was being transmitted to every corner of the Empire. Every subjected species, every oppressed world, every being who had ever feared imperial retribution was watching their emperor being dragged across the floor by a physically unremarkable human. Please, Draxul's voice dropped to a whisper, abandoning threats for pleading. Whatever ransom you want, whatever concessions, name your price. Harlow stopped at the Grand Senate entrance, his hand still firmly gripping the Emperor's now soiled robes. Justice isn't a transaction, he said simply. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to set an example. As they passed through the doorway, heading toward the human ships, I finally understood. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice, not really. It was a message written in the universal language of power and witnessed by an empire built on fear. Nobody is untouchable. Nobody is beyond consequences. Not even an emperor. And the galaxy watched in silence,